Greetings, booktubers, and welcome back to Grammaticus Books. Today on Grammaticus Books, we're going to do a little bit of a booktube potpourri. So I'm going to talk about a couple books I just finished. After that, I'll go into a mini book haul that I did this past weekend that's got some interesting stuff that I think you guys will find as interesting as I did. And then I'll talk about the books that I'm currently reading. And then the last thing I'll do is I'll give you guys a quick update on some videos that are going to be coming up here shortly on the channel. And there's some good ones. So that's the outline. Let's just jump right into it. Let's get right into it here. And what did I recently read? Well, I just finished reading the Anubis Gates. And that's the Anubis Gates by Tim Powers, 1983. It's basically about time travel. And there's a bit of a backstory as to why I just read this book. So I'm watching Michael K. Vaughan's channel, which is an awesome channel. He's a fantastic booktuber. I watch pretty much every episode, every video that he makes. I'll link his videos down, I'll link his channel down below. And I'm watching Michael K. Vaughan, and he's talking about how he's reading the Anubis Gates. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. You know, I read that book about 5 or 6 years ago. It was okay. I'll be really interested in hearing what Michael K. Vaughan has to say about it. So Michael finishes the book, and he's giving his overview of it. And he talks about how it deals with ancient priests of ancient Egypt. I'm like, yeah, check. And that it has time travel in it. And I'm like, time travel? Well, kind of, sort of. And that it's set in the 1800s in London. I'm like, what, 1800s London and has werewolves? I'm like, werewolves? This is not the book that I read. That is not the book that I have in mind. But I know Michael is right. He's 100% right. He's holding the book in his hand while he's talking about it. So I know for sure that he's got his stuff straight, and he always does. So then the question becomes, well, what the heck did I read? So I finally figure out that what I read was not the Anubis Gates. I read a book called The Gates of Anubis. And these are two totally different books, two completely different animals. And the book that Michael K. Vaughan is describing sounds much more interesting than the one that I read. So I dutifully went straight down to my local library. I checked out a copy of The Anubis Gates by Tim Powers and went back and read it. And it was good that I did, because right after I checked out that book, I came across another one of Tim Powers' books, and I had never heard of Tim Powers. I was, mistaken about which book I read, and then I saw this Drawing of the Dark, which is about the defense of Constantinople with a bunch of magic and sorcery thrown into it against the Turks. And this looks really good. I'm looking forward to reading that. And the Anubis Gates really put Tim Powers on my radar, which is why I grabbed that, and I would have missed it. But the Anubis Gates, it's about a corporate magnate in 1983 named Darrow, who discovers that there are these holes in the flow of time, and that using technology, he can exploit these holes to travel back to certain points in the past. And he wants to travel back to London of the 1800s in order to attend a lecture by the poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge. And he puts together a group of people to go back to this lecture, but he needs an expert on poems and poets and poetry from this time period in London. And so he recruits our main character, whose name is Brandon Doyle, who is an expert on this type of poetry and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. So that they get asked questions while they're attending this lecture, they've got somebody there who can answer in an intelligent manner and hold up the pretense that they're not from 1983. So they go back, they use this time portal, they go back to London, and predictably, in order to have a story, things go horribly wrong. And at that point, you have just all kinds of things come into play. You've got time travel, you've got beggars' guilds, you've got thieves' guilds, you've got the 1800s London, which Tim Powers describes perfectly. You've got werewolves, doppelgangers, mutant monsters, time travel, like I said again, ancient Egyptian priests, ancient Egyptian gods, body snatchers, and on top of all of it, just a ton of sorcery thrown into the whole mix. And it's a great story. Tim Powers, he puts a lot of balls in the air. He gets a lot of plot threads going at the same time, but he very deftly manages all of these plot threads and weaves them together in a very satisfying manner. And the end of the book is excellent. I really enjoyed the end of the book, which is something that I appreciate when an author does a fairly lengthy book, which this was. I want to say it came in around 400 pages. And then you can bring it together at the end and do a really good ending. And I do recommend it 2 thumbs up. If I have any complaints about it, and these are small complaints, my two complaints are that I think it was about 50 pages too long, and you got into sort of this cycle with the antagonists capturing the group of protagonists in this book repeatedly, and then they would have to escape, sort of like the Scooby-Doo gang, an episode of Scooby-Doo where they keep getting put into some captured place and have to get out, where you've got the protagonists are held by gypsies on a riverbank, then they're stuck on a boat, and then they're captured in a building in London, and then they're held in a dungeon down in London, and on for like 3 or 4 other iterations. I'm like, oh, okay, enough, Tim. I think we could cut back on that a little bit. But other than those two very small minor complaints, this was a really good book. I'm glad I read it. And that's The Anubis Gates by Tim Powers, 1983. So the other book that I finished was Keith Laumer, Envoy to the New Worlds, which is the first book in the Retief Chronicles. And Retief is a galactic diplomat in the far future. Let me put on my spectacles here and I'll read just a little bit off the back blurb. Jamie Retief, Vice Consul and Third Secretary of the Terrestrial Diplomatic Corps, is little known among his contemporaries, even though he is perhaps the greatest diplomat ever produced by that agency. He is the man who must bear the brunt of the problems involved in developing the frontier worlds of the 29th century. And it's Keith Laumer, who worked in the diplomatic corps for a while, I think taking out his frustrations with the diplomatic corps with his character here, Retief. And Retief has to go out and solve these very difficult diplomatic missions on these alien worlds. And at the same time that he's dealing with these aliens, he has to deal with this massive red tape bureaucracy and the diplomatic corps that he works in, and all this diplomatic ineptitude. And it's very light. It's written with a very light touch. It's I would call it semi-humorous, if just not outright humor. But it's a lot of fun. The stories become a little formulaic. It's 6 short stories put together to form a composite novel. And I believe this was originally published in 1963. Yes. First Ace printing was August of 1963, and this is the second Ace printing from 1978. It's a lot of fun. It's a very light-hearted, light sci-fi book. It's a quick, fun read. I give it a 7 on a scale of 10, and it's very short. You can blow through this in an afternoon. I will say that the cover on here is a little interesting. That's supposed to be Retief, I'm assuming, and you've got the planets in the background, but he looks a lot like Dracula, and he's got this big red cape. And then you've got these demons on the inside of the cape. And I know that they used to have a bunch of stock art from their artists who would produce art for these covers. And they wouldn't use it all. And so every now and then they would go in and they would find a piece of art if they had to throw it onto a book real quick for like a small publication like this. And I wonder very strongly if this wasn't originally supposed to be a Dracula painting for another book that they pulled out and the artist took, and he just added in a couple touches to make it look like a sci-fi novel and throw it on there, because that looks a lot like Dracula to me instead of a intergalactic diplomat. But anyway, that's Keith Laumer, Envoy to the New Worlds. I give it a 7 out of 10. And the last thing that I read here over the past week was Conan the Barbarian by Titan Comics, issue number 9. This is an excellent Conan comic book. Titan is just knocking it out of the park with this reboot that they're doing of the Conan the Barbarian comic book series. Each comic book just gets better than the last. And with this one, we have the return of the artist Robert De La Torre, who again just channels Big John Buscema from the Marvel years. There you've got Brule the Spear Slayer on the front. And then here you have the intro into the comic book here with The Age Unconquered, Part 1, Suffer Not, the King of Wonders. And there's Conan. And just look at that drawing of Conan by Robert De La Torre. That's just magnificent. I mean, you could not ask for anything better. If you guys haven't picked up these Titan Conan comic books, I'm telling you, if you're a Conan fan, you owe it to yourself to go out and get these. They just keep getting better and better with each issue. And with this issue, Conan goes back in time to Volusia with Brule the Spear Slayer and King Kull, and it is just wonderful. I highly recommend it. So that's everything that I read. Let me take a quick pause here. I'm going to get a hit of water. So that's everything that I read. And I said I got a mini book haul over the weekend. I was feeling a little down in the dumps. My wife saw that I was feeling a little down in the dumps. I won't go into why. Wife saw that I was down a little bit. She goes, hey, let's go to Half Price Books and let you look around. And my wife never volunteers to go out and look for books. So I jumped all over. I was like, yeah, let's go. And if you don't know what Half Price Books is, it's a large used bookstore chain here in the Midwest. And they have stores that are about half the size of your average grocery store. They're big. And people can come into them and they bring in their books out of their home collections and they sell them back to Half Price Books. They have a big counter where they just process these books. And then those books go out on the shelves. So you're continuously getting new material, new books up on the shelves. And there's a lot of vintage science fiction and fantasy. So I went out and I took a look. And the first thing that jumped out and caught my eye was a book by Fred Saberhagen called The Holmes Dracula File. So I see The Holmes Dracula File. I see Fred Saberhagen of Berserker fame. I got a bunch of Berserker novels here. I think I got all of them. Here's Berserker Planet, which I believe I just finished not that long ago and did a video on, if I'm not mistaken. So it's Fred Saberhagen who I like, and it's The Holmes Dracula File. I pick it up, I read the blurb on the back, and from the blurb, it sounds like Dracula and Sherlock Holmes team up back in London in the 1800s in order to solve a mystery and a giant threat to the crown. I mean, this has got, if you know Michael K. Vaughan, this is like a Michael K. Vaughan fantasy come true. Dracula, his favorite book of all time, combined with a team up, like a Marvel superhero team up with Sherlock Holmes, one of his favorite fictional characters of all time. So I had to pick this up. I got to pick it up, and I've actually already started at about 50 pages into it. It's very interesting so far, but I've never heard Michael K. Vaughan talk about it, and I can't imagine that this book is out there and it has these characters and he's not aware of it. So if he hasn't talked about it, although maybe he talked about it long ago, that might not bode well for the quality of the book, but we'll see. I'll let you guys know how that one goes. That was the first one. So Dracula and Sherlock Holmes, can't go wrong. The second one that I picked up was The Mercenary by Jerry Purnell. And I recently did a video on Ringworld, Larry Niven's first book in that Ringworld series, which is just Ringworld, self-titled. And noted that Jerry Purnell and Larry Niven had teamed up on a couple of books in addition to doing the Ringworld series, most notably The Mote in God's Eye and Lucifer's Hammer. And I think there's another one, Footfall, that was a team up that they did as well. I have The Mote in God's Eye, and that's an excellent novel. So I saw Jerry Purnell and I'm like, yeah, that's probably a pretty good one. It's The Mercenary, a little sci-fi novel. And I pick it up and I read the front cover to it and I get a little surprise because the front cover says, the fantastic forerunner to The Mote in God's Eye, one of my favorite sci-fi books. John Campbell Award winner and co-author of The Inferno, Jerry Purnell. So bam, definitely picking that one up. That was a nice little find, a nice little score. Hopefully this measures up to The Mote in God's Eye. I'm really interested to see how this is the forerunner to The Mote in God's Eye. That'll be a great little read. Good find. And then the last book that I picked up was Robert A. Heinlein. I've done a couple of Robert A. Heinlein videos recently, and in those videos, down in the comments section, in the great comments that got put down in there, and people were talking about all the Robert A. Heinlein novels that they really liked, and I need to mention Time Enough for Love came up over and over and over, as did Glory Road, which I have over here, right there, Glory Road. But one of those other books that got quite a few mentions was Revolt in 2100, which I don't own. And there I see Robert A. Heinlein on the shelf, Revolt in 2100, like score. There's another good score. And I pull this one out and it's got a cover over it. It's got a price sticker on it. And I see obviously it says science fiction, Robert A. Heinlein. You have Revolt, but it's the E at the end of Revolt is covered up. And with the packaging that was on this at the Half Price Books. And I missed that. I get it home and I open it up and I guess you can determine where this story is going. It's French. The whole book is in French, which I don't read. So I still don't really have an English copy of Revolt in 2100. And I'm afraid that that story will remain a mystery here on Grammaticus Books, at least until I can pick up an English version of Revolt in 2100. So that was a bit of a bit of a bummer. I got my hopes up and then they were dashed by the French. And I'm going to get another hit of water here. Kind of soothe my throat a little bit, and then we'll drive on. So I'm currently reading The Ringworld Throne by Larry Niven. I did a video very recently on Ringworld. I've read Ringworld and Ringworld Engineers, but I hadn't completed the series, and this is the third book in the series. I'm about 2/3 of the way through it. I've got a lot of thoughts on it, and when I finish Ringworld Engineers, which should be probably about Wednesday of this week, I'll put up a video on it, probably in about a week and a half. The other work block, having a little bit of trouble there. The other book that I'm reading is The Lies of Laumer. And this is book 1 in the Gentleman Bastard series. I recently learned about the Gentleman Bastard series, and I'm about halfway through this one. I'm doing the audiobook on this one, and I'll say this, the voice actor is phenomenal for The Lies of Laumer. He is just absolutely phenomenal with his accents and his characters that he can do on this book. The jury is out on the book yet, but I'm only about halfway through it. So I'm hoping that things kind of congeal here a little bit better in the second half of The Lies of Laumer. But that's The Lies of Laumer, first of the Gentleman Bastard series. And I'm also reading Requiem by Don Stewart. Part of my reading challenge of Adventures in Time and Space. This is a science fiction anthology from the 1940s. I think 1946, if I want to say it's when this was published. And I'm going through and I'm reading one of the short stories out of here each week. And right now I'm reading Requiem by Don Stewart, which is a pen name for John Campbell. It's beautifully written. It's written with an elegance that you just don't see. It's not that common today, unfortunately, and a lot of the modern authors. And you can really see why John Campbell, had such a reputation and had built such a reputation in the golden age of science fiction. He's a beautiful writer. So that's Requiem. I'm almost done with it. I'll probably finish that today. So that wraps up what I'm reading. We've done what I've read. We've done a little mini book haul here. What are my videos that I've got coming up? The next video that I've got coming up, which will be either Friday or Saturday, is on one of my absolute favorite books out of my entire collection. If my house was on fire and I was running out the door and I had my wife under one arm and I've got my family pet under the other arm, and I still got 2 fingers left to grab something as I'm going out and I'm running by my bookshelves, this would be very, very high on my list. It might be number 1. I don't know if I can say I've got a favorite book because I've got so many that are so good, but this would definitely be on the short list. It is The Gothic and the Eldritch, the collected sketches of Jess Goodwin, and the tale of Jess Goodwin working within the Games Workshop Warhammer 40,000 universe, and I just love this book. It is just a phenomenal book. It combines a bunch of genres and hobbies that I just absolutely love. It combines vintage science fiction, vintage fantasy, as well as a bunch of hobbies, wargaming, sketches, artwork, and wargaming models and miniature making. And it's all rolled into one, and it is just, everything in here is just off the charts beautiful. A great, great collection put together by John Blanche, another legend in the wargaming community. And I'm going to go through this book in detail. I'll get an overhead cam for it, and I'll go through all the pages in it, and I'll build the entire story around Jess Goodwin, Warhammer, and all these sketches, and how Jess Goodwin was really one of the driving forces behind the largest gaming company in the world, which is Games Workshop. But that's it. There is one last thing. There is a rumor on the horizon that there may be another Steve Donahue BroTube movie challenge coming up here in the near future as well. So stay tuned for that one. It's a rumor, but I think it's going to happen. I think it's coming together, and it'll happen sooner rather than later. But that's a wrap on today's BookTube potpourri here at Grammaticus Books. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And with that, I'm going to say take care, be safe, and I'll catch you guys next time.